What up, YouTube? It's May 23rd. It's about 10:05 right now. I just got out here in St. Louis, Missouri today or earlier. And I'm about to, say it's like a quick little blog for memory purposes. No paper. Nothing in my lap. This is just the environment. Not looking at shit. Anyway, it's about the marriages. I was kind of interested. I'm like, okay. Now I went throughout the history so far. I'm in 636 pretty much. I said, why not do like a side blog and keep it private and shit? In case I forget something. So I can retain this information as I go along. So I'm like, shit, let me do it. Because when I first started reading about this history, I remember online on the Wikipedia, they was talking about like marriages in Arabia. And it was like 4 different approaches. And I remember one of them was like as far as like a contract where you could be married to somebody, but it's a mutual agreement as far as how long you're married to this person. And I always thought that was interesting. So like fast forwarding like a fucking year later, I'm like, shit, let me pause for a second, do another separate creative blog specifically about that. And so let me go into it. It's like 4 of them, like 4 or 5 of them. The first one, they call it marriage by agreement. And that's just basically like a mutual agreement on both parties, but really just between both families. And a lot of times this is like within a tribe. But based on this article, they were saying like sometimes you could have like a woman from a different clan or a different tribe marry a man. The only thing is, if they took that approach, if it was a female from like a different clan or a tribe, they wouldn't have as much rights as somebody within a as a woman, a part of the same tribe as her significant other. So like for instance, if you were a part of the same tribe and you was a female, you'll have a little bit more rights, like you can divorce when you want to. That was the difference. So that was called like a marriage by agreement. No special word for it. And by the way, before I go along, some of this shit kind of like overlaps, and I explain as I go further. The second one was called marriage by Mahr, M-A-H-R, and this is kind of like an overlap to me because it's still a mutual agreement. The only thing is with this one, it almost sounds like a fucking prenup to me. Kind of, somewhat similar. With this agreement, it's like, okay, when a man and a woman marry, the man have to pay mahr to the wife. So it's like a fixed amount or a sum. And the only way that he would be exempt from doing that is if, on the woman's behalf, she didn't require it. You know what I'm saying? So that's like really the only difference. There's other stuff that they said about it, but it's like it's just like slight. For example, if something happened to the male or whatever, like he got killed, this amount would still have to be paid over to the woman, but it'd have to be from the male father's behalf. By the way. That's the only difference. And then in the beginning of that part, they also said like the groom's father would have to pay this amount anyway. So it's like a little confusing. But like I say, it's just like the mutual agreement. I guess it's more like an inclusion as far as like the payment to the female for marrying the guy. Now, they didn't say anything about a contract on this aspect, but logically in my mind, I'm like, that sounds like a contract within itself. So that's the second part. The third one is called marriage by capture. And the Arabian term is ba'al. I'm not sure if it's pronounced that way or there's a difference with the inflection, but it's B-A hyphen, basically B-A and then A-L. So ba'al, I'm assuming that's how you say that word. It's basically like if it's some type of war or even a battle that occurred between tribes or clans, and then you capture the women or whatever, then you can marry them and they wouldn't have any rights, or you could put them on the slave market and then you can sell them to somebody else and they'll either be like a concubine, a slave, or somebody else's wife. That's it. So the example that popped up in my mind immediately when I read about this is Bilal ibn Rabah, like his mother, for example, because she was captured around like 10, not 10, but sometime around 570, and she gave birth to him after the fact. But she was like a Abyssinian princess, and when she got captured, she became a slave. So based on my knowledge of that story, I'm going to say that's an example of marriage by capture. Let me see. Another one was inheritance. Inheritance. That's basically like, for example, if I married a female and I had kids, I had a son. If I married a woman and then something happened to me, my son gets my wife or all of the wife. Like if I marry more than one female, for example, my son gets to inherit all of them. I couldn't really think of any examples offhand to fit that, but that's the definition. That's like one approach to marriage itself. But I'm pretty sure a lot of people that were captured were more than likely just sold into slavery. See, another one is Beena, Beena. And that's just basically like, okay, when you marry a woman or whatever, but she also has her own privacy. She lives in a tent, and that's where she resides at, but her husband or her significant other does not stay in that tent with her. So like I say, all 4 or 5 of these, they kind of like overlap. So those are like the definitions of the different approaches to marriage within itself. Again, as far as the contract, didn't say anything specifically about that, but I feel like you can merge that with Mar, for example. That's it. Now that's the foundation. So I'm like, okay, let me check into Muhammad's marriages based on my recent studies and stuff like that. Like I said, I know about Ramla bint Abu Sufyan, the daughter of Hind ibn Utbar and Abu Sufyan. And she was someone that Muhammad had married, but she was in Ethiopia when he first sent this proposal to her. I get to her in a second, because she's like one of the last ones. I'm going to talk about the first female that he married. Her name was Khadijah. Now, Muhammad married her in, and let me show my environment, you know what I'm saying? Ain't no motherfucking papers or nothing like that. Anyway, Muhammad married her. He was married to her for about 25 years. She died at 619. So that would place their marriage in 594. Now, the thing is, they supposedly had kids. Now, this is all Wikipedia articles right here. You know, some people say she had 6. Then the book Tariq al-Tabari, it is claimed within that book. So I might reference that number, that they had 8 kids together. Now, Fatima is one of them. There's no dispute about her. Everybody agreed that she was actually Muhammad's child. Other people claim that those kids may not have been Muhammad's biological children, except for Fatima. But even though Tariq al-Tabari claims that it was like 8 of them, you know, they mentioned like at least five of them in this Wikipedia article, because it's called Muhammad's Wives. And the first one, she was supposedly the first daughter that he had with this lady Khadijah. Her name was Zainab, and she was born around 598. And then another one, she was born in 601. Her name is Q-Yay, I believe. No, Ruqayya. That's her name. Starts with an R. Ruqayya. She was born around 601. And then another one, his third child, her name was Kulthum. Now, I'm not really sure on how to pronounce that, but it's Kulthum. Khatum or something like that, or Kuthum, or Kothum. She was born around 603. And then another one was, I know it was a son, and then you have Fatima. Like I say, they don't name all 8 children in this article because that's one interpretation, but that strictly comes from that book, Tariq al-Tabari. To make a long story short, all of these women died later on. Only one of them, who everybody agrees was actually his biological daughter, Fatima, had kids that lived up into adulthood. And she had 2 sons. One name was Hassan, and then another one name was Hussein. And these 2 people come up later on in this book that I've been reading for a while, called The Origins of an Islamic State. So there's no real dispute about that. The other children, so-called, like some people say again, that they were adopted from her sister, from Khadijah's sister, and then raised within the household of Muhammad. And I'm thinking, should I mention certain things? Well, I guess I'll go ahead and go into this for later purposes. A little bit of familiarity for now, I guess, which might turn out to be beneficial as I go through the book, because you never know, this might come up, because Uthman is mentioned as being the husband of 2 of these daughters that Muhammad supposedly had. Now, as far as Ruqayyah, she died in 619. But by this time when she died, she was married to Uthman, which is the 3rd caliph of the Rashidun period before Ali. She was married to him, and then one interpretation is that she became sick and that's how she died. Before she died, she supposedly had a son that lived up until the age of 6, and then he died later on as well. Now, the second interpretation as far as Ruqayyah is that, you know, she got beat to death by Uthman. I'm not sure, like, whether she's Muhammad's biological daughter or not. I don't really believe that portion, only because Uthman, after she died, married her sister, and I figure if he beat Ruqayyah to death, it doesn't make sense that Kutham would marry him later on, almost immediately after that, even though she ended up dying as well, because she died in 529, I want to say. Yeah, she died in like 529. So I highly doubt if he actually beat her to death. Even though I tried to be real fair about it, because I thought about Safiya ibn Huyay, for instance, which is Huyay ibn Akhtab's daughter. You know, that whole little invasion of Kabar in 628. Oh, by the way, let me make a correction, man. Sometimes I be having these little brain farts, and I accidentally say 5 instead of 6. But anyway, in 628, this whole little conquest of Kabar. Following that, she had ended up becoming Muhammad's last wife. She was the last female that he actually married. And so, like I said, when I was thinking about this whole thing as far as Uthman, I'm like, shit. I mean, it's a possibility that he may have beat her to death, even though I deny or I doubt that happened, only because of the logic of Safiya. Safiya's brother, her husband, and her father, Huyay ibn Akhtab, was killed by the Muslims, and they were ordered to be killed by Muhammad. But yet, she still ended up marrying Muhammad later on, and as far as her story in particular, Safiya, you know, she was, it is told that she had these like dreams about Muhammad, that she was sort of infatuated with him in a sense. And it was hard for me to grapple with the fact that she would end up becoming his wife when the Muslims were responsible for the death of her fucking family, pretty much, her brother, her father, and her husband. So I tried to consider that, but I'm still like, I don't know. I'm going to say Ruqayyah more than likely died from whatever disease that she had, and then her sister later on became the wife of Uthman. I think that's more than likely the story as far as how that occurred or whatnot. So let me see what else. Fatima. Fatima died in 632. She was born in 609, which is the same fucking year that Iyas became the governor of Al-Hira, which the Sassanid Empire had control over. It just brought me in the mind of that. But anyway, she was born in like 609, but she died in 632. Her sons lives on, and they become more important later on, as far as like I don't want to. Well, I'm gonna say like what they call that, the fitna wars, like like little warring between fellow Islamists, instead of it just being like people that apostatize or whatever, in which they call that Ridda wars. That's the only difference. But her son Hussein is going to become more relevant later on, especially within that book itself, The Origins of an Islamic State. But Fatima was definitely Muhammad's daughter. Now, that's all as far as like his first marriage. The second, let me show the environment again. You know what I'm saying? Hold on, let me show my other hand. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, the second marriage that he had was with Aisha. Now, of course, Aisha was Abu Bakr's daughter or whatnot. She was born around 613, between 613 and 614, according to the Wikipedia articles. But I'm gonna go with 613. This is fucking interesting to me. Muhammad decided to marry her. Well, actually, you know what? Before I talk about that, let me also mention one more fact as far as Khadijah is concerned. Now, that was a mutual agreement, by the way. So when I talk about like marriage by agreement, it fits that, but it also fits marriage by mar, because it's a flip side to this one. Muhammad didn't necessarily approach her and ask to marry her. It's the reverse. She actually wanted to marry Muhammad, and she had a buddy by the name of Safi, or Safisa, if I'm not saying the name incorrectly, or Nafisa. That person went and conveyed a message to Muhammad that she was interested in marrying him, but he was a little reluctant about it because he felt like he couldn't afford it. But she offered, and she said that she had enough means or whatever to take care of him. And when their uncles all met, Abu Talib and her uncle, both parties of the family, again, going back to the first definition of marriage, or at least that first approach as far as the agreement, they all agreed, and then he eventually ended up marrying her. But it is told that, she was one of his favorite wives. In fact, Aisha later on may have harbored some jealousy about her. Not sure if that's completely true, because that tale is written during the fucking, what was it? I say during the 9th century. So this is like about 200 years later, basically. And it was supposedly written by Aisha. She had this whole collection of different hadiths and stuff like that. And it was written within a hadith, and she admittedly say that she was somewhat jealous of Khadijah. But Muhammad, they say like he kind of favored her because she took care of him when he was down. For example, before 610, when he had that whole little revelation that occurred with Gabriel the angel or whatnot, when this whole little revelation occurred on the Hijaz, somewhere within the Hijaz mountains, and he came back and he was shooken up from it, and he conveyed his experience to her. And I don't know, I guess he was almost in shock because, he asked her to cover him up with blankets and all that type of stuff, and he confided in her a lot. So that, that basically points at the fact that they had an intimate relationship. So when she died in 619, obviously he still held her dear close to his heart. Now, skipping back to Aisha. Again, she was born in like 613, all right? When she was between 6 and 7 years old, that's when Muhammad wanted to marry her. But I'm going to go with 6 years old. Why? Because Khadijah died in 619. So it makes sense that during that same year, of course, after bereavement, that Muhammad would look for another wife. And just also another fact, Khadijah, and this points at the intimacy between both of them. In other words, the sincerity and the the sincerity of their love for each other, because she was the only woman, according to this article, that Muhammad, remained faithful to. He didn't have other wives or anything like that. So anyway, she died in 619. After she died, he married Aisha. But of course, Aisha will only be like 6 years old. And they say that she stayed with her parents, Abu Bakr and her mother, until the age of 10. So that would be around 623. By this time, Muhammad is definitely in Medina. remember, 622, the covenant of sacrifice was made in Medina at the building of the sacrifice, as far as like the constitution between Muhammad and his answers and Zimmis and etc. Everybody that was under this overall covenant at the time. So this would be like a year after that. At the age of 10, that's when he had sex with her. The term that they use is consummate. But that's when sexual intimacy occurred. I gotta pause there and talk about this. I'm like, see, when I think about this, not just when I read it, but like after the information, has clicked and I'm processing this shit, I'm like, how can I come? I'm like, I know I'm gonna talk about this, but how am I going to be fair about it, but not kind of sound somewhat harsh? Now, Muhammad would be around 53 years old, right? Because he's born in 570. So he would be about 53 years old. So he's a 53-year-old man. Now, this part right here, I'm excluding anything intellectual, whatever, because, like one of the things that stands out about Muhammad to me, he's obviously a very intelligent man, just like one of his first qazis, Abu Bukhari, was. But I'm excluding the intellectual aspect, and I'm going to focus more so on the tradition on this one. I'm like, he's 53 years old, and he had sex with Aisha when she was 10. So this would be 623. A woman don't naturally catch her period that young. Close to the fact after it, probably like around 12 years old. I do know of a woman that did get on her period at the age of 11, but still she's pretty much an adolescent in modern terms today. So I'm like, how can I point this out and not be somewhat critical of it? You know what I'm saying? Because I remember a very long time ago, right, when I was sifting through YouTube videos. This is over a decade ago. And, I used to read the comments a lot because I was kind of curious what other people had to say about certain shit. And I remember somebody, I can't remember the person's name, but they was kind of like dogging a lot of people's cultures around the world. It was obviously more than likely a white person. But they was like, Arabians, they were, they're backward culture, and they was basically calling them brutes and shit like that. So, when I thought about this, when I was weighing it in my mind, I'm like, I could see somebody saying that about this particular aspect, but I can't really say I don't think it's anything wrong with that. Me personally, I think that's way too young for a female to have sex with a fucking adult male at the age of 53. If that occurred in this society today, in America and many other societies, that person would be labeled like a fucking child molester or something. You know what I'm saying? They'll go to jail and they may get shunned by all of their close acquaintances. But it was a normality, at least this aspect, in Arabian culture back in the day. So I'm like, that is fucking crazy. Like that book Ibn Battuta, right? When he was talking about when he went to Abu Layton. And he was saying like he was a little bit puzzled from certain practices of the culture, like from the Qazi that was there, and how he was kind of like talking to other women or flirting with them, and how he felt a certain way about it. But like when he went more in depth as far as like how their culture played out, they were Islamic, but as far as like sexuality, they had a lot of freedom in regards to that. Like if you was a male, you could have sex with other women as well, even though you were married. But at the same time, your wife could do the same thing, and nobody felt some type of way about it. And how, like, if you came inside your household and you caught your wife being intimate with somebody else, that particular male may go sit somewhere else and wait till they get done talking or doing whatever that they may do. Now, I felt like that was a little weird, but it was like a difference in culture, and I'm like, okay, I can understand that. That's a different type of approach, so I wouldn't necessarily criticize it. But when you're talking about like a 10-year-old and a 53-year-old, that's a little, it's kind of like, when I was in Memphis, Tennessee, right? And I had went to a Walgreens out there, and I picked up a magazine. And they was talking about, you know, the most famous serial killers. And I forget this fucking guy's name. And I always told myself I'm gonna try to find out. I'm gonna read a little bit more about him. But they had one guy, and I never heard this. And when he'll kill his victims, right? He'll take their bones and he'll make like pottery out of them shits. You know what I'm saying? He'll make little statues and stuff like that. And you know, they was pointing it out to talk about like his derangement. But when I was processing it in my mind, not to say that he was right for killing people, but as far as like the creative aspect, I'm like, shit, that's what they was doing like 30,000 years ago, 35,000 years ago. You know, like in Europe, for instance, all around the world, really, but specifically in Europe, because the oldest pottery is found there, going back at least 30,000 plus years ago. And when they'll kill an animal or an elephant, for instance, or they'll take ivory and they'll carve figurines out of that. It was the same thing that this particular serial killer did. The only difference is he did it out of human bones instead of animal bones. So on one hand, you can see like the craziness, but on the other hand, you can see the creative aspect. See what I'm saying? So when you go back to this example as far as Muhammad, it's like, okay, I can see the cultural aspect of it, the tradition of it, but at the same time, me living in 2018, I don't see no way to justify that particular fucking aspect. A 53-year-old having sex with a 10-year-old. So I thought that was kind of, I thought that was weird and crazy. But that is how the story is told as far as Muhammad and Aisha. She was his second in marriage. And she, after Muhammad died, she later on married, damn, I forget. Anyway, that was his second marriage. Now his third major marriage, and I probably should put the word major in there because it's claimed he had like at least 13 wives. But you know, there's 4 main marriages. So the third main one would be Safiya ibn Huyay. Again, that was around 628 after Kabar. Following that, that's when he ended up marrying her. And really, actually, that's his fourth. That's his last one. The third one was Ramla bint Sufyan. Even though I like to say Utbah, but Sufyan. She was the one that was in Ethiopia, and then Muhammad. And again, this particular marriage or this approach would fall under a mutual agreement. She was in Ethiopia when Ashama ibn Abjar was still the Negus there, and he had sent the message through somebody else for her to marry him. So she would be like the third. So that's basically all 4 of his main marriages. And again, the only child that survived that nobody argues against to be his biological seed was Fatima. So that's basically all that I read so far. Like, you know, like I said, I wrote this down like probably like a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, when I was in Evanston, Illinois. I just didn't get a chance to, you know, do a blog about it because I had a lot of stuff going on around me, and I go by based on how I feel. I don't force information. So when I arrived out here today in St. Louis, shit, I'm like, let me go ahead and get this particular aspect over with so I could go with the next chapter. The next chapter in the book is the conquest of Kinashrin, which is in Syria, not too far from Hims. So I'm done with Yarmouk and all of that type of stuff. So I got to get through Kinashrin and Palestine. Chapter about Palestine. Yeah, the chapter about Palestine and Kinashrin. But again, I wanted to do like a creative blog as far as like Arabian marriage and the tradition of it, and then like the different approaches to it, and then some concrete examples involving characters within early Islamic history who were contemporary, who were alongside Muhammad, who lived during the same time that he lived. So that's it. I don't think I'm forgetting nothing. Let me see, am I? If I am, that's all right. I always say if I'm forgetting information, I got 90% of the motherfuckers, so I'm decent. Again, let me show my environment. go back in front of this library, upload this on YouTube, and then it's time for me to go in and go to sleep. Again, it's May the 23rd. Y'all have a good night. Retention purposes, this is not to do nobody's motherfucking homework. Let me repeat that again. This is not to do nobody's motherfucking homework. It's strictly my studies. Alright.